do the wrong way with the wrong intentions, I say quiet hiring is not going to work. And when I reflect back, I felt like, you know what, that was a wage theft. Why do you need to come back, right? Micromanagers are like, I need to literally watch. You got to understand the environment and see if there's something you can do, self-reflect. So by 90 days, I figured it out, what's working, what's not working. And the reality was completely different. If you Google whitening resume, a lot of people are concerned about it. If you want extra from me, what's in for me? I'm going to go somewhere that I am celebrated. Remember that people are using the model that I'm going to teach you today throughout their life, either to negotiate, either to get that next promotion, or even write the exam for case studies. Hi, my name is Sweta Regmi. I'm a certified career strategist and resume strategist who was a previous hiring manager. It's coming up exclusively for immigrant and newcomers. Right now, the enrollments are open. Continue this journey. I would like you to welcome you so we can go and create this dream for you. You've heard so much of my client before. You've heard so many dreams that came true, who decided to invest in themselves. Free resources are there for you. And my only agenda for this workshop for an entire week to give you what you can continue with, actionable advice. But if you don't execute it, if you're not doing the homework, you had a workbook and you're not doing it, you don't know your whys, you don't know your personal branding, you don't know where you're struggling, you're still going to continue struggling. Those are generic advice, but how you implement it, I teach that in my program. I gave you a lot of information. Probably for some of you, it was too much information. So you have to go and watch a replay. Sometimes watching replay helps you really understand, know who you are, self-reflect as well. So don't forget the replay. It's going to be expiring soon. And if you registered, you would be getting email as well for replay too, right? Tomorrow, I'm holding Q&A session dedicated it. There is no program out there who's going to do the things for you. At the end of the day, teacher is going to teach you, right? Stretch out, delegate the things, because we see potential in you, that you can do it, that you don't even know that you have potential on yourself until you do it. When the resume work comes in, people just come up with so many resume criteria, they have no idea where to start. And that's what the resume needs to be, which is you need to be clear on what you want, first of all. And we went through that. Marketing, personal branding, being clear, what industry, what title, even researching the title, right? We went through that all these times. So now it's about time to put everything in writing on a resume to get that interview. If you don't put on a resume, if you don't brag about yourself, there's no data, there's no evidence. Well, what is going to happen? They're not going to call you. They cannot read your mind. Make the job very easy for those recruiters. Recruiters are partners with the hiring manager. And if they like you, honestly, on phone screening, they will do anything to represent you. Give them a reason to represent you. Make it very easy for them, right? If they already picked you and you land the interview, that means they really like something about you. They saw you as a fit, right? Otherwise, why would they just push on sending the candidates to the hiring manager? Hiring managers are really mad. It's like, what kind of candidates are there? You know, they picked you for a reason. Now, if you're not converting, you know what? They have nothing. Recruiters would be like, okay, I thought the person was really good in an interview on a phone screening. And some people just screw up everything because what they're doing there is the way they talk to a recruiter, they're using the similar approach when they are talking to the hiring manager. You can't have the similar kind of mindset and similar kind of technique when you're dealing with the different people. And we talked about it yesterday, right? What's in for me? I want you to think about it today. When you're talking to the people, always think about what's in for them. How can you relate to their pain? That's it. Recruiters have different pain to solve. Getting the hiring managers a good lead. Hiring managers are the one who's a decision maker. They have a different pain to solve. And you don't know until you start researching and asking the right questions in interview as well, right? So now there is the other hiring manager. It would be senior manager. Hiring manager likes you. The senior manager is there. You're going to potentially move on to the other round. And depending on the type of role that you're going through, right, you're going to talk differently. Senior manager, you talk to differently. And sometimes, and I talked to you about Isra, who made it to Amazon. She's an HR. She's an HR manager, right? She went through multiple rounds. That's what's going to happen. I have a couple of people on Amazon. They went through a whole day blocked interview, one after another, right? You can't talk about same examples in same way. Remember that. There's no one size fits all answer for interview. Even that includes telling me about yourself. Okay, so let's go with the right example of accomplishment stories. I'm reading the workbook that you have. It's down there if you want to see it, what I'm talking about, the workbook that you got it. So what examples of accomplishment stories and examples that includes data? What do you have? Do you have data? All the jobs should have data. If you don't have a data, then find out what's the data that you can validate, right? There's a quantitative data and qualitative data. Evidence proves it all. How have you saved companies money? Whatever it could be, right? And I'm going to show you some of the high-level example. This is not to say this is the only strategy. I teach different strategies based on the roles, based on the type of role you're targeting, based on the company that you want to target and stuff like that, right? This is a generic overview of how to write the resume using the CAR model. So CAR, so it could be the contest overall, or the challenges, or the actions that you took, or assessment that happened, and the results or recommendations. And this is so customized that it all depends on type of role in companies. And that's why it's not going to be, you're not going to be using the challenges all the time. You're not going to be using the action all the time. You're going to be using probably assessment. It depends on the type of question they're asking you. So you need to know the framework. Remember, Ray was talking about how I am using the CAR model from your sessions, right? And what he's saying is on CPA, when I'm writing exam or something like that, I use your model, but he uses it differently. Same framework, but there is a different lingo, language, and everything. So if you understand that, for every interview questions, you should follow that framework. And the reason being is you're not going to be rambling. If you stick to that model, people just would follow through. I came from the hiring manager world. I was a hiring manager, you know that, right? I've been talking about it. If you don't know, then you should know. Why am I the right fit to talk about this? I've interviewed thousands of people. We were given the questions in advance, and every department had a different questions, right? I've had 9 promotions in 12 years, and every interview that I went through, it was different type of question depending on the role, right? And then plus as a hiring manager, when I led multiple teams, different questions. It was already drafted by HR team. It was given to us before the interview, and we're supposed to go and ask those questions. And you know why companies do that? I like that strategy because everyone is going to be treated fairly. Everyone is going through the same kind of questions. So there's no biases and discriminations. And that's what the top employers do. If managers are going to just start random questions, how are they going to compare that with the other candidate? Conversation is a good piece. You can always talk about it. This is why it destroys the biases and discrimination when people start to not follow the structure and script. And that applies to you as well. If you don't follow the structure and tell me about yourself, you're going to give too much. And that opens the biases and discrimination right there. That's a first question potentially you would be asking yourself, okay, what do I say and tell me about yourself, right? That could be on the interview when the interviewer calls in, the first phone screening. Everyone has biases. You have your brain, you have biases. So do I. We got to self-reflect. Some recruiters are new. Some hiring managers are new, and they're not aware if they have biases. They don't even know. I'll tell you an example in a resume that I teach my client. Do not put the street address. If you're putting it there, there's a bias, especially if you're living in Toronto area, GTA area, Brampton, Mississauga, anyone from there, let's say, put Toronto in there. Location bias is there. I have heard my colleagues saying that, oh, the person lives in Brampton. I don't think it's too much time, like commuting time. So they're already making the decisions on that. It's a bias, it's discrimination technically. How do you navigate around that biases? You have some control on it. I teach that in my program. Example is not to put the street address, not to put Brampton, Ontario, put Toronto, Ontario. Let them guess. They can't ask you where exactly you live, right? You don't have to tell them. That comes in when you get hired on the offer letter, whatever. It's too late, right? And you're just not trying to fit in there. Don't get me wrong. You're not lying. You live in GTA. That falls in GTA, right? So be strategic about it. Giving too much information about personal thing is not the right approach. And that's what happens with the immigrant community and newcomers. They come in, they talk about, tell me about yourself. Like, oh my God, I landed in Canada, this, none of that, avoid it. You do not want to potentially open yourself into the biases. There's already biases when it comes to immigrants and, the newcomers. So don't give too much information. And for you to not give too much information, I walk client through the CAR model, right? And there's a CAR model and there's a CARL model, right? And CARL model is used when they're asking you the toughest question, which is what's your weaknesses? How do you deal with a conflict? That's actually now they want to know, are you self-aware? So you're going to talk about lesson learned in there on interview. We're going to go through that a little bit later on. Back to the resume. So don't give too much information and be very specific in title. Remember I talked to you about it. When you research on a career clarity, you need to really research about the title. Whatever title you have, even in Canada, that might be customized role. That happened to me when I had a layoff. The role was customized and I had to change the title and put it, there's a way to put it on resume, equivalent to whatever, right? So that way you end up on a search as well. People are not going, if you can't find your title in Google and LinkedIn, chances are you're not going to be found anywhere else. That's a key to it. Write it down. Go and search your title. And if you can't find your title and the job posting anywhere else, you got to find out what are the titles there. That's a key to writing the resume first. And by changing the title, you're not lying it, but got to be very authentic. Make sure you communicate that somewhere on the resume. Location, you want to move to the new location, right? Willing to relocate is the other example in resume. So you're avoiding that biases. And you also have to talk about it during phone screening. I am going to relocate myself. You don't have to compensate me. Or maybe compensation comes in negotiation. That happens in senior leadership later on, right? That's a part of it that you can negotiate, salary negotiation. So these are the things that you got to play around based on what are you targeting. Sometimes you might not want to say willing to relocate and put wherever you're moving, right? It all depends on what kind of company. Are they going to offer the compensations? Are they hiring for like local talent or outside? Because there's a taxes involved in the province to province in Canada too, right? And there's a reason they don't actually reach out to people outside of that particular location. Even though if you're remote, sometime you would see the job posting saying, we want remote in Ontario, in Vancouver area, right? There's a reason for it. You see? So you got to know the job description. So let's go back to the resume writing skills. CAR model. Your challenges that you know that you're known for and you can solve it, you can prove it. And the assessment and action, whatever you did it, right? And the result of that. Okay. So put it in there. Take a screenshot, right? This is what I want you to be very perfect about it. Start writing it down. I help companies to achieve what process, right? There's a processes that you are supposed to fix when you go in there. That could be challenges, that could be contests, right? Depends on it. And by doing which actions, assessment you're known for, right? And it's either or, it cannot be both. And then I implement with what skills that you have, the expertise, right? From industry, the certification, the designation, PMP, it depends on the role, right? How important is that? And then how do you, what happens after that? When you actually go through that, what happens after that? The goal. Do you exceed the goals? By how much, right? What's the track record? 3 years in a row, 5 years in a row, consistently, and revenue per month. And again, these are all the keywords as well you have to start thinking about it. Sometimes your role might not even require talking about revenue. Sometimes your roles probably require overseeing the budget. Sometimes your role probably requires customer satisfaction, employee engagement, handling complaints, right? These could be something that you have to research and see now. Okay, how do I talk about this? As you're talking, right? Anytime, I want you to think about it. Anytime you're talking, when you look at the job description, you're sprinkling the keywords from the job descriptions. That's a strategy. You're sprinkling those keywords, everything. Have you done it? On a resume, same thing. You're trying to relate to them, solve the problem, right? Having them at hello technique would be on the top. If you don't do that well enough, they are not going to go at the bottom. You only have 10 seconds to please them. And I'm not saying everyone looks at the resume 10 seconds, but thousands of applications, 10 seconds on my desk. I'm going to look at it. I like you. I'm going to put it here. Later on, I'm going to go 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and I'm going to say to my recruiter, hey, I want to talk to that person. That's the strategy I teach in my class. How do you have them at hello on top, half page, so that way they call you? Most people don't even go into the second page. If your resume is too long and you've just worked, like, let's say, one job, right? And it all depends, like, job description. Sometimes you might be wondering, how many pages too much? My answer is always, it depends. What kind of role you're targeting? What are the job descriptions sounding like, right? Your answer is always going back to the job description. Don't sit here and listen to anybody who's going to say, well, resume has to be 3 pages, 2 pages, 1 pages. The answer to the job search is all depends on your kind of targeted role and industry, what they want. It's a collaboration between the employers and yourself when you're writing a resume as well. That's why the resume needs to be customized. Here's the catch. If you're not clear on what you want, you'd be spending so much time on writing the resume, rewriting it all the time. But if you know what you want, right, that's a targeted title. Most of the time, you should only take like 15 to 30 minutes to update the resume based on the job description. If you're spending too much on it, you want to have every piece of pie out there. It's not going to be possible. So you don't have a perfect branding. You're not going to be spending whole day on entire resume. If you are doing it, something's going on in resume. That's why you're not getting the interview. First thing, going back to clarity. Are you clear on what you want, right? You should never be going and updating resume all the time. It's a quick fix for you. Got it? Okay. Bullet point, example, right? There's a data and there's a keyword. All right. So there you go. The keyword right there. Every time you're writing the bullets, you have to go and relate it back. So let's say this job's talking about complaint handling. And this is like, let's say you probably have to deal with the external customer, vendors, right? And here's the thing. Here's a catch right there. So when you say retention by 25%, you put it right there. But what if the retention rate in the company KPIs that you're going to be handling, you're expected to have retention rate up to like 30% or 50% is the bare minimum, right? This is why research comes in. The answer is in the job description, and then understanding how you're going to be measured. And that's going to be happening in the interview. You have to ask right questions to get it, right? And how you articulate an interview afterwards. Seek to understand before you start assuming your success is going to be measured the same way that you've done it back home. Especially for a newcomer, you need to relate. Just because you measure a certain way back home, that does not mean that you'd be measured the same way. That does not mean the data would be the same way, right? So 5 to 6 complex complaints per month. Is it too low? Is it too high? Now, the ball is in your court to find out. And you will only find out if you understand the market and targeted role, right? This is where you got to start talking to the people who are already in the role. And this is going to be sitting on the clarity aspect. Reaching out to the people, networking, everything. You know, the pool of people on a clarity that you're going to be connecting with, this is where it comes in. It would be so easy for you to write the resume if you understand what's going on in the market in Canada, right? So then SLA, what does that even mean? If you don't understand what is SLA, that's a jargon that everyone uses it. But that's in the job description, put it out there, right? SLA sometime would be service level agreement, right? It's huge on priority award on one sector. It might not be in the other sector. Just because you know it from back home, you don't have to put it there. You know how many times that happens? They still use the jargon from back home. They still use the jargon from the other industry. People are like, what the hell just went on, right? Recruiters, remember, are not trained for jargon for the role. Only hiring manager, also the technical hiring manager, would hunt you down with the jargon. They love listening to the jargon. When you're talking in an interview, you got to push the jargon. as long as you know they use it internally to make it feel like you belong there already, you work for them already, right? That's a strategy. When you're talking to a recruiter, avoid the jargon, focus on the job description, and depends on what kind of recruiter. If they've done the role, perfect. Otherwise, be simple. Do you meet the requirement? Yes. Hiring manager, use the jargon based on the industry standard, but again, that might apply in industry to industry, right? So what was the result of that in particular? So let's say resulted in complaint drivers, leading to ombudsman, right? Like, reduce what? Complain. Now, why did I put ombudsman? Do you understand how the ombudsman in Canada works? A lot of people don't. They don't have a process. And I'm going to tell you why I talked about this. We're going to go through the interview strategy. If you don't understand what's the process involved to resolve the complaint in Canada, especially the particular industry you're targeting, you don't have a technical knowledge. You don't have a local knowledge. And this is where no Canadian experience kicks in. Tell me if you're a newcomer here, you're suffering. If you're rejected by no Canadian experience, this could be why, because you do not understand the process in Canada in particular system. It happens a lot. So here, it's probably banking example, right? They have ombudsman, they have an internal ombudsman, they have external ombudsman. There's a process. They have a complaint analyst. They have like supervisor. There's a ladder of escalation. All the companies in Canada, they have to follow the ladder of escalations. If you're the first point of it, just because you're the first point of entry in customer service world, that doesn't mean that you're allowed to just go like, hey, it's too much for me to handle. And there's a question on interview as well, that there is a question on a workbook. Take a look at it. Why am I bringing this example for you, right? How do you handle complaint? Do you take a responsibility, right? Things like that matters. Just because there's a ladder of escalation, just because there's a manager or supervisor helping out, that doesn't mean they're like, I can't deal with this, right? You need to know the process. Client's going to ask you, give me refund. You can't say like, no, like, you're going to probably take accountability. Why not? Why? Looking at the profile and possible way for you. You're mandated to go like, you're not happy with this. You know what? We have this. Let's escalate. Some companies just write an email, write the letter, right? So do you know the process? So eventually it boils down to writing the resume and going in interviews, understanding the local market or local industry where you're trying to get in, right? And this is where when people are trying to pivot from one industry to the other one, they're going to have a hard time because they have that biases and assumption already, thinking that, oh, I know it all. I've done it all. But you might not know it all. That might not be the tool that used it. And it might take years for you to be expert on that, right? And maybe that's not the employer's choice first. And this is where you're going to be weeded out because you're not sounding connected, right? So you always go back to solving their pain. I can relate pain or I can learn pain, right? So let's move on to the interview sections in the interest of time as well. So I've given the example in resume, right? Rule that people are just going to tell you, just apply anyway, even if you don't meet the requirement. I just say no to that. Why waste the time when you can wait for the right role, right? It takes a lot of time, a lot of time to apply for the role that you're not the right fit. And it takes a lot of hope. You just, after applying, you have that hope and then you just wait. If you don't meet the requirement, don't apply. If there's a requirement on the job, hiring manager wants what they want, right? And sometime in the government job, there's a compliance. For the companies as well, there's a compliance that you have to meet the requirement. Don't even shoot it. This is where you got to reach out from the back door to understand, hey, I am lacking this, but here's what I have. What are you thought on it, right? This is how you build a network on it, right? I'll give you one example on it. So I was pivoting from the corporate world and I wanted to go to nonprofit, and every nonprofit job descriptions, they had the social degree that I had to have. Everyone. I didn't have it. I had a business admin, right? And they said nonprofit experience as well. So I built a network before moving in. I want to volunteer, I influence literally the VPs and general managers there. And when the posting came in, first, they didn't even bother contacting me. It was a consultant, entry-level role. I was like, I'll take it anything because it's a nonprofit. I really want to make an impact. They didn't. And I connected with the hiring manager. I applied for the role and there's the other role. I feel like I'm more suitable for that role. What are your thoughts on it? But I don't have a degree, but I have this. And I bring the hiring manager's knowledge. It was on employment and immigration services, right? So I connected that well with how I've been working with the newcomers, immigrant community, how I've been coaching them, right? As a hiring manager, how I have worked with the diverse. So I connected with their pain. That's the pain that they were dealing with it. Right after having coffee chat, I got so many inside scoop. I bypassed that system. So the hiring manager called me and said, I know that you wanted to come in and volunteer. Do you want to work for us full time? And we'll give you one step ahead, right? It was a consultant and I got hired as a job developer recruiter, right? They're like, I think you're a fit for this one with the type of experience you bring. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. And I worked there for a couple of months and I quit to start this consulting, right? So if you don't meet the main requirement, always reach out to the hiring manager. I don't have this, I have this. How can we work together, right? But then that's the reason I didn't get the first one, because I applied online, didn't build a network. And later on, I was like, okay, let me build a network. Because we almost have an ego. Like, I have this, they should hire me more than I should work with them, right? Put that ego down. Put that ego outside the door when it comes to job search. You got to be humble. You got to be willing to network, right? You got to be willing to overcome rejection. It's not personal. You got to be willing to be ghosted. As soon as you dwell onto it, it's going to be very hard. Mindset matters. Think about, so what? They didn't call you, so what? I'm going to move on. I'm going to build the next door. I'm going to knock the next door, right? Don't dwell on it. You applied, you did it all, 100%. You followed up, thank you email, everything. You networked, you sent an email to a hiring manager. You did it all. That's all you could do, right? You wrote the resume well, you qualified, you went through an interview, you did everything. They didn't call you, follow up 3 times, and you're good, right? 80-20 rule is something that I always stick by. Make sure you apply for the role that you meet at least 80%, right? I wanted to share something that a lot of people don't know. This is what like the background of ATS could potentially look like as well. When I'm hiring on the internet, let's say on a LinkedIn, this is a LinkedIn tool that I use for job posting, right? If I'm hiring for it, I can knock you out. This is the only time you are going to be knocked out. Your resume is going to be knocked out. Your application is going to be knocked out, but I can still see your resume, right? If you don't meet the minimum required criteria on my job posting, you get me knocked out. And you wouldn't even know the knockout question, the way I would phrase you sometimes. This is where you got to be very careful. So let's say, how many years of the way that question is going to be rephrased, okay? How many years of experience you have in SEO and dealing with the Google Analytics? You're going to say 2 at the background. I'm going to say, I'm only going to review the applications from 3 to 5 years. You don't know. This is why you got to see, right? And then sometimes employer is going to say a knockout question before you even start the application, submit the resume. Employer is going to ask you, do you have 5 years of experience in this particular tools, right? If you say no, you're done. If you say yes, you're lying, because that's going to come up. That's a criteria. And sometimes it's a compliance issue. They cannot hire you, right? And they say you have a bachelor degree. You say yes, later on, they will want you to upload that on their system. Their education industry and public sector, they will want you to put the credential there too in the application phase. What are you going to do about it? So don't lie, just go follow the rule. And knockout questions, you can only get ahead, but then it's going to be captured in an interview, right? So the other knockout question, I would always go back, because I seem to get a lot of international applicant. I would say anyone who applies outside of Canada, just non-fit. Right? I'm going to knock them out. Even though if you go onto the LinkedIn profile and then apply saying that, if I ask you, are you eligible to work in Canada? If you say yes, my system can track IP and it would be rejected. I'm not going to even go into the resume bucket. Automatically, it would be unfit. These are the ATS tool on the back end as well. People can set up the same way as well. And you don't know how are they setting up a system, right? ATS is completely different. There are like more than 300 ATS tool in the world, and you have no idea how recruiters are knocking you out, how recruiters are sourcing you out. So your job is to make it easy for them. So even if you are not ending up on a search right now, are you going to end up on their Boolean search if they need people like you? I don't know if it happens to you. Sometimes what happens is when you are applying for the job today, you might not get it today, but a couple of months from later, recruiters are like, we found you. You know how they found you? Boolean search, because you are their leads now. These are already leads. Why would recruiter go and post and redo everything? That's why before posting, they go and look into it, or after posting, they go into their ATS and then Boolean search, and you're going to end up there. And there's a strategy I teach in my program. How do you end up on recruiter search all the time, even though you're not getting a role right now? And that's what the LinkedIn, SEO branding and everything comes handy. Remember Mayuk yesterday, who came as a manager from Kuwait and who was told that you got to step it down, you got to dumb it down. He landed senior management role right away. And then he got promoted in director role, and recruiter reached out to them, and it was a sourcer reaching out to them on LinkedIn, right? Based on the branding. In large company, there's a sourcer. Tell me if you know what's the difference between a sourcer, a business partner, and talent acquisition. So you got to watch this. Who are you talking to? There's a third-party agency recruiter. There's the agency that's hiring for that particular clientele. You really need to understand who's hiring for the role. Who are you talking to? Third-party, company agency, talent acquisition has nothing to do with the agency, business partner, sourcer who's sourcing you, and he's not the one who's going to interview you, just sourcing it and sending the leads, right? You got to understand the environment for your targeted role before you start writing the resume and branding yourself all over, okay? So you saw the example of it. Rejection email gets sent out, and we can trigger it on our back end, like how many days later. And sometimes you might say, like, you know what, I was rejected in a minute. I was rejected in, like, you know, right after one day or something. I bet nobody even looked at it. No, because it was probably rejected because we set out the system right there, right? And you must have not met the requirement. And that's a key. Knockout question is really something that you got to look for if you don't want to be rejected on the spot, okay? All the resume sits in the system and go from there. Resume sample, have them at hello right there on top. If they don't like you here, it's just the example, just short, high level, okay? It's one of the example for one of my clients who made to the top companies. But again, like, you know, he had more than that, but I just edited it, some of it. So what do you need to do when you actually literally are going to hand over the resume, right? Having them at hello, putting it very easy for them, especially if you have a digital portfolio and you know that you're going to be asked to sign in, you better have a digital portfolio, right? You better have it. Remember I talked to you about last time how one of my clients who was a data analyst came up with a portfolio, came up with the project. Remember the slide that I showed you? This guy? Oh, let me see here. This guy right here, data analyst guy, he landed the role in like local town, and he is teaching in college, guys, the same college he graduated. Why do you think he got that? He showcased his work. This lady, Smita, was featured in CBC News as well. She started writing content because she's a content strategist, right? And she has a digital portfolio. This guy has whole entire resume built based on his skills, right? So again, in order for you to stand out, you got to give them portfolio. If I'm hiring someone to build my website, let's say, resume doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is like, okay, you know what? Show me the sample. Do you have that? You better have it. Remember, the best way to stand out is not doing things that people are doing there. That's the only way. Okay. That happened to me recently as well. I'm going to share that example. So over here, you know, having them at hello with whatever they want, right? It's not about, again, what you're doing. It's about what they want. And putting these keywords right there as well, making sure that you end up right now and making sure that this is the standard, the technical, soft skills and hard skills, right? It all becomes a part of strategy, and these needs to change all the time based on the job description, tweaking it, and the bullet could be changed as well. But if you're clear on what you want, you should never have to waste so much time in just writing a resume on it. That's a key. And then obviously education and certifications, like the headings and everything, is really important on it too when it comes to resume, right? So you got to make sure that you give them what they want, right? Certifications and everything. And there's a caveat when it comes to overqualified people and stuff like that. So I teach all of that in my program. So if you're overqualified, how do you not showcase that you're overqualified? You're the right fits, right? And here's the thing that I see a lot of immigrants doing. If you have 20 years of experience from back home, you think that 20 years of experience would be something that would stand out when you write the resume? No. If they're just looking for 5 years of experience, you got to try to see how do you navigate around that, right? So you're paying the wisdom tax. Do you know what the wisdom tax is? Which is you're already like, you know, weeding yourself out, saying that, oh, the person is like, we just want 5 years. But the person with the 20 years applied and we can't pay them enough. They already have a discrimination and biases, right? So stop giving information that's not going to be helpful for you. That this is what I teach in my program. And it's all customized based on your unique situation. I have people that I've worked over 40, 60, And I had a guy who was working in valet one time, and he was old, tenure, very smart guy. He was trying to switch. He wanted to put the date all together. I'm like, no, you're not putting dates in here, right? And then we put the experience, which is listed from 15 years back, because he wanted to go to consulting, right? If you want to go to consulting in the targeted role that they want the experience like that, you better show it, highlight that experience. And we put it out there. He's now doing the consulting, right? It worked in his favor when we worked together. When we're going through the interview as well, it's all about highlighting those experiences. So it matters only when employer wants to see you. Sometimes the experience before 15 years matters as well. Sometimes it does not matter. It's going to be too much for you. So you have to understand the world of targeted industry and the world of targeted role. Okay. So when it comes to the interview, I'm going to go quickly move on to the interview sections here. If you can see it, I'm going to share this. Okay, you can see this interview framework. Okay. Remember, I gave you the guideline for, you need to know what's going on. So let's say, and this is the assignment for you, you can go and see it. So the interview question would be something like, describe a time when you effectively handle an internal or external customer complaint, right? So the rating here, some of the organization, they have a rating. We used to have a rating as well. Like, sometimes they would have 1 to 10, 5 being the best, right? And the way they do the rating is, now if you see HR sitting literally, if you see HR sitting right beside them, they want to be calibrated. The HR role is to make sure that everything that hiring manager is discussing, it's following the policies, right? Eventually, hiring manager is the one who's going to make that decisions on it. And they're writing. If you see all the interviews are written, especially in Canada. I'm supposed to take the note, and I have a structure, like let's say star, car, whatever model they're using it. We follow the star technique, right? Similar to car technique, right? But then again, I have to write. So I would have a sections in there to write it down. Okay, what was the contest? What was the situation? What was the task? What action did you take? And what was the result of it, right? I, as a hiring manager in HR, is writing down the example. If you screw up in that example, what do you think you'd be scored at? 1. I'm not going to go back, and I was nice enough to go back to people and lead them on. If you're missing the action, I would say, so what did you do, right? Managers don't do that. Some managers like, it's not my responsibility to coach them, right? They should be preparing themselves, right? I'm going to be asking like, oh, so what was the result of that? So I can get that as well, right? I'm giving you that clue. The minute you're missing it, there's no manager out there sitting down and finding the answer. Like, they don't have a time. Hiring manager's role is not to hire all the time, guys. This is not the best part of the job. This is something they have back-to-back meeting. This is one of the chores for them. It's a pain that they're trying to hire right now. So you have to move on so quickly and get them get them right there in the moment, right? Do you think you're the only one who's interviewing? My calendar would be booked all day. Sometimes I even had to go on weekend to literally book because I didn't have a time to conduct the interview, right? And we used to hire in batches, right? So I used to travel to interview to the different province because I was hiring bilingual team. And now I have to partner with the bilingual leaders, and it's all scheduling mess. So I'm stressed out already. So I'm sitting in down. I want you to go fast, don't wing it, be relevant. And that's the interview I want to hear. And I would usually know on that first question, tell me about yourself. The minute you ramble, you lost me. I kind of already know how the interview is going to be. And I'm like, okay, the signal that we had in the company that we knew that you're not the right fit, you're not answering properly, we sense it, and we're giving you a chance. And interview would be 45 minutes to 1 hour. And me and HR would say, okay, if I'm not moving ahead with it, I'm going to put the phone down, put the pen down. So I'd be writing it, and I feel like it's not moving, it's not the right one, we got to move on, right? HR would be putting phone down, and my signal would be, okay, HR feels like they're not the right fit. Okay, let's see. I'm going to give you more chance. I'm going to hear, right? And I'm going to put the phone down, and HR is like, okay, so we're calibrated now. Okay, so thank you for coming in. So interview comes short. You got to make sure that, probably you sucked at it too, right? If you're interviewed, and it's not going to be happening all the time, If you interviewed for like 1 hour and you're done in half an hour, either it was fantastic, hiring manager decided like, I don't want to proceed, I want that person in the team. Short, and you feel it was so horrible, then there's a reason for it. You got to worry about that, right? So here's the catch here, right? So when someone is asking you all those questions about it, what they're looking for, do you take the scores are based on, do you meet or exceed? There's meet, there's exceed. Promotion do not go to people who meet. It's always going to go to people who are going to exceed the goal. Remember that. Any company's KPIs, your success is going to be measured for that. And promotions are usually most likely going to go to people who are going to exceed it, right? And you have to reflect that in your answer. How do you exceed it? And then when the complaint happens, like, what do you do? How do you deal with it? Do you run after your supervisor and colleagues and senior, or do you take the onus and try to solve the problem? So the leaders, managers, they're not going to be around all the time to support you. So what are you going to do when there's no answer? Do you say, I'll follow up with you in a couple of days, a couple of hours? Do you follow through though? Because companies have SLA. Remember, your SLA last year in that company, 1 to 2 hours might not be that SLA. Maybe you have half an hour to commit to it. Maybe you have 1 to 2 days and not 5 days, right? So that's why the SLA comes in as well. So how you talk is, what are they trying to find out? Are you the right fit, right? What's meat for you in last company might not be meat in this company. You see? So this is where when you talk in the interview, you need to understand, how are your success going to be measured? What are the KPIs like? And I put the FCR. Do you know the meaning of FCR? If you don't work in the certain sector, you would not know. And you need to know those lingo, right? First call resolutions is something that a lot of company uses it to measure the client satisfaction. Were you able to resolve the concern in first call, right? So you got to understand the lingo that you're trying to move in. And this is where a lot of us coming from the outside world misses the chance. And this is where automatically they go like, oh, they're not the right fit, not the right fit. So you don't want to be that. You work so hard on resume. They liked you on a paper. And when you sit down, you're not even prepping yourself. It's your homework to not waste anybody's time. Follow the framework and give them what they want. There's a reason you're invited. 90% of the time when I'm inviting you, sometimes I would pick up the call and do the phone screening. When HR is busy, I'm like, I'm just going to do that, right? If I was not busy, I would do that too. If I don't like you on phone screening, I don't feel it, I'm not going to invite you. Right? It's a qualification. I liked you so much on resume. I want to pick up the call and then just listen to you. But nothing came out, right? Phone screening is the most important screening. That's going to move you ahead with a different round. And the way that you move ahead in different round matters. How do you talk to people in different round matters? Amazon actually used to tell me, like, to tell my clients, okay, you gotta better have different answer. We used to record answer all the time too, right? So like there's a reason for it, because we need to know what's going on. Do you know why we do that, top companies? If we get the lawsuit of rejection, I even had to put in, why am I rejecting you? And that all goes down to the ATS, right? It's to document it, the process. We put it in there for so many years. You as an employee, candidate, could come back and sue the company saying that I was discriminated. And there's a note and there's a reason HR is there. Any company who's just interviewing solely are opening them for exposure, right? If you want to talk to like right company and work in the right company, they have a process in place and you have to understand that process. Okay, so the homework, let me know if you learned anything in the interview framework today. So the way that it works on that is obviously you're going to talk about, what did you do to handle that complaint, right? How was the complaint trigger? And you got to focus that complaint based on what targeted role you are, coming in. You can't just randomly create the complaint, because this is where the expertise comes in. As a hiring manager, I already would know based on your answer, if you can fluff it on a resume, did you write your resume yourself? I can even ask you like the question, like, can you walk me through the resume? And if you can't articulate that, this is where the problem comes in. So you need to learn how to write the resume, right? And articulate that in an interview. Explain this point from resume. If you didn't write it, you would not know. So that's why stop copying and pasting the resume from the online world and template. You need to learn how to write the resume, because if you do that, most of my clients who made it in a top company, they wrote the resume and they made it because they now know how do you articulate in an interview. If that becomes clear, you'd be so much better in an interview, right? If you look at the job descriptions, 5 job description. Are they same? The answer is no, right? What makes you think that resumes should be same? There's the answer. And that's why people don't get an interview call, because they're just using the same generic resume. You need to customize it. The questions for most common questions, and I have a blog as well on teachingyou.com blog section as well, which is how do you talk about your weakness? And a lot of people, what we're taught when it comes to weaknesses, we're taught not to accept it, and we try to create the weaknesses, which is going to turn into strength. Stop with that BS, right? As a manager, I don't want to work with you if you're not even self-aware of it. The reason I'm going to be probably asking you is, okay, how can I support you, right? So let's say if your weakness is public speaking, say that strategically, as long as you're not targeting the role, which requires you to do the public speaking, right? I can understand that. But then how am I going to support you down in the road if there's eventually opportunity that comes in, presentation or something? I know I'm already aware of it. Now I'm going to support you. There's a two type of manager who's going to ask you this question. One is to weed you out. Two is to support you. And I'm the second one. If I already know, I'm writing it down. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to give them a tool and work through it, right? That's my job, to coach you and make you better leader later on, right? The way you would answer the weakness question is, always go with the example. People stop with that. I have a weakness in public speaking. And then you're like sitting down, right? I want you to have a conversation, an interview. Interview is all about conversations. When you're talking about weaknesses, you go with, I've been struggling on this. Again, the CAR model. Go in that. How do you use the CAR model, actually CAR model on weaknesses? Go and check it on my website. There's an example as well, right? But this has to be customized when you're doing an interview. It might not work with everybody. It has to be really customized. And this is why my program, is very successful. What happens is I give you the framework, and then I test you. I do the review for resume. I do the review for interview as well. And we're recording it, and you get the recording back as well. So you know what areas you need help on, right? You can go read my blog and practice it, but who is going to be mentoring you, right? You got to be mentored with somebody who already knows the hiring world, who's already done the interview, right? And this is the beauty of my program, that people get results on it, because now not only they're applying the framework, they're getting a feedback on top of it, and they're going to go there and practice it. And we're going to practice it later on what went well and what you could do differently. And then you can strategize it. So it just gets better and better. If you go to interview playlist, there are a bunch of things. How do you talk about conflict? What are they trying to do, you think? They're trying to find out, are you collaborative, right? How do you approach the conflict? Do you stay out of it, or do you call it out? But how do you call it out matters as well, right? Yeah, I had a situation. It's like, never say I never had a conflict. I'm like, you're bound to have a conflict. You got to spin that positively. I love conflict, because when that happens, that I love to seek the people's understanding. Because can you imagine? Conflicts are really good from DEI perspective. Imagine we're working with the same people all the time. There's not going to be conflict. I don't want to be surrounded myself with a yes man all the time, yes woman all the time. I want people to call me out like, I think differently. And I'm going to say, my best question on conflict, dealing with the conflict, is help me understand. Tell me more. I'm seeking to understand before assuming there's a conflict and disagreement. Disagreements are really good because it helps you identify the process gap. And this is where I come in and fix it, because I love working with the process gap, right? Here's an example. I've done it. CAR. When that happened, this is what the challenging conflict happened. This is what happened. This is what I did. Action. This is what I recommended. Result of that was this, right? Like weakness. When that happened, this is what I did, right? And then go on to result was this. And what was the lesson? I learned that conflicts were really good because we tend to fix the gap right away, and that helped there. So you got to go spin around with a challenging question to self-reflect. Tell me the time when your boss did not give you good feedback. Boss gave you the constructive feedback. Don't say like, I never had that. We always had that. And the CAR model comes in. When there's a challenges that people are trying to ask you the questions, CAR model, you got to always go back with what was the lesson learned and how are you growing by learning, like getting that constructive criticism from the boss, because you're not going to be stellar performer all the time. You would be new at the role. You're struggling. What you call down a learning curve, what did you learn about yourself, right? What did you do about it? And what are you going to do about it when the same situation happens? You can go extra, right? And then moving on to the conversation piece, which I put it on my program. And like, when I'm doing the interview coaching with my people, I just like ask conversation. People are just going to sit there and interview and take like, boom, boom, boom question all the time. That's not the right approach. Have the conversation. The minute they talk about, tell me the time you fell the deadline, anything with the performance review, you want to go back, what answer? But while we're at the topic, could you please let me know how the role is the success going to be measured? What are the plan in place for 30, 60 days and 90 days? That helps you understand. Don't ask the question for the sake of asking. Ask the question for answering. Now you know the KPIs. Remember that 25% retention that I gave you? They're going to say, well, retention is 50% actually here. Now it's like, all right, next time, actually, I used to meet all the time, more than 50%, right? You are trying to relate to their pain now. Get the information and interview before it's too late, before you start assuming it. And how you do that would be the conversation, right? They're going to ask you at the end, what question do you have for us? Don't wait it until end because we have a time. We're not going to go extend it. You know what happens with the conversation technique that I'm teaching you? What's going to happen here is when you start engaging in the conversation, right? Then instead of hiring manager going through the 10 questions, you're going to ask 5. Do you want to keep talking? No, you want to sip the water, listen, like give them a chance. What is the best part about working here? Can you tell me more? And I teach the model in that tell me about yourself, which is share to my paid clients. It's beautiful. It works fantastically. I'm going to call out my career gap. I'm going to call out everything and tell me about yourself. So we've addressed that elephant in the room in the first second. And we're going to move on. And I'm going to say, talking about that, I heard that there's a charity going on. How did that go? Tell me about yourself right after. They're like, oh, good to know. So I'm giving them conversation that I know what they're doing. So you got to lift your energy up. You got to go and say, listen, I'm such a right fit and this is me. Deep. Take a deep breath. You're going to be nervous in interview, but I want you to think about this when you go and interview. You are there to identify the fit for yourself too. They don't have a power over you. You are much needed for them. Take it like a dating. When you go see somebody else to get married, networking to meet someone or date, you're trying to get to know them too, right? Apply that technique. Why not? At the end of the day, you can be spending 8 hours with the team. You're equally accountable for asking the questions. I have 20 more questions to ask in the interview, full blog. Go and check it out, what you should ask. And it all depends on like, how do you ask? You want to avoid the ghosting? If they don't tell you, ask, when are you wrapping this up? How do we get the feedback? When are you thinking of, having that role, the person start, right? If they're telling you in a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, if you don't get it, you already know you didn't make it. Still follow up. Thank you email after that, right? It gives you so much power when you start asking questions. You know how many times I hear people online saying that I was ghosted. My thing is, did you ask? Interviewers are not going to be trained. Remember, they're supposed to be setting the expectation. What's the next step? When do you hear? How many people they are hiring? When the interviews are wrapping? Not everyone is trained how to lead an interview. It's your responsibility to now drive that conversation to make sure that you're not ghosted, right? It's your responsibility. And that's exactly what I teach in my program. How do you control the narratives? How do you dictate how this interview is going to be out? People, you have to manage up. You have to coach them how to interview sometimes. If you do a lot of that, you would know, but it takes practice. All right. All right. So other than that, I am going to let you go and have your time back. We're done. But again, I am coming live tomorrow. Sent out. If you have not received the link, maybe you didn't sign up, go to teachanddo.com workshop. And then I'll see you on Zoom at noon. I'm going to come in and introduce this. This is exclusive access to the immigrant community for if you're really serious about doing this together with me, being part of the success stories with other clients. They showed you what's possible by investing. With that being said, thank you so much. Have yourself a great weekend. Talk to you tomorrow. See you tomorrow on a Zoom call. Take care. Bye-bye.